The Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, wants you to remember China's recent economic miracle as their most important legacy. However, we must not forget the reality of what life was and is like in China under the CCP. The mass starvations, the political oppression, and the ethnic cleansing of communities across the country. This is the history of the CCP Xi Jinping does not want you to know. It's party time in China as the country's Communist Party celebrates its centenary. In June 1921, the Chinese Communist Party was founded during a small, secretive gathering at a deserted building in Shanghai's French concession. If those attending could return to China today, they would struggle to comprehend the transformations which have taken place since. In the decades which followed its founding, the chances of the CCP taking power looked remote. The party was kept on the fringes and persecuted by Chiang Kai-shek's nationalist government. It was the Second World War which ravaged the country that enabled the CCP to emerge triumphant from the Chinese Civil War in 1949. At the time, many in the West were blind to the atrocities already carried out by the CCP before they came to power, or chose to ignore them. They would soon realise the threat Mao posed to not only the Chinese people, but to world peace and prosperity. Today's regime in Beijing attempts to whitewash the CCP's dark history. However, it is incumbent on those of us living in free societies to tell the truth about the Chinese Communist Party's bloody legacy. The People's Republic of China was born with terror. As the CCP sought to cement its grip on power in the early 1950s, campaigns were launched against those it deemed potentially subversives, including businessmen, landlords, and former nationalists. The intensity of those campaigns grew and grew until, in true totalitarian fashion, those who were suspected of merely having the wrong thoughts became targets. The following years offered little respite for those seeking stability. Mao's great leap forward led to economic chaos and the worst man-made famine in human history. It was succeeded by another disaster when Mao attempted to purge the party and society of reactionary influences during the Cultural Revolution. Throughout his rule, in the name of both party and ideology, Mao pursued a program which was responsible for the extinction of between 40 to 70 million lives. To put that in context, a similar number of people are estimated to have died in World War II. Even Mao's successor, Deng Xiaoping, who did much to liberalise China's economy and open it up to the rest of the world, was, to his core, a party man. When the CCP itself felt threatened in the summer of 1989, Deng decided to turn the party's guns on the peaceful protesters in and around Tiananmen Square. Hundreds of student protesters were killed. It is one of the great paradoxes that the most successful proponent and beneficiary of capitalism in the modern era is the People's Republic of China. The country's advances are no doubt remarkable. One only has to look at the skyline of Shanghai or any of the other new super cities which have sprung up all over China to see that the People's Republic is a global economic powerhouse. The CCP has already made much fanfare of these economic developments over the course of this week's anniversary celebrations. This should come as no surprise. Party figures never miss an opportunity to boast about their success, lifting millions of Chinese citizens out of poverty. Indeed, only last year, President Xi Jinping declared victory in ending extreme poverty. Of course, we can quibble about who exactly bears responsibility for this economic miracle: the party or the Chinese people whose drive and ingenuity was able to thrive once the party dispensed with ideological dogma. Dogma which throughout the years of communist rule has distorted the country's economy. This is a point which China's current leadership would like you and I to forget. Self-preservation remains the key to understanding the CCP's suppressive instincts. By delivering the economic goods and fanning Chinese nationalism, the party has survived into the 21st century. To satiate these nationalistic desires, or as Xi himself puts it, the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, those who resist rule from Beijing today are brutally oppressed. Tibet remains one of the most unfree places on earth. Meanwhile, other grotesque human rights abuses are being carried out against Xinjiang province's Muslim minorities. Hong Kong's autonomy, supposedly guaranteed until 2047 under the Sino-British Joint Declaration, has been thoroughly eroded in recent years, while military threats against Taiwan, a fellow liberal democracy, are continually ramped up by an ever-belligerent Beijing. Xi and his acolytes proudly proclaim that without the Communist Party, there would be no new China. By this, they seek to claim credit for all the country's successes while whitewashing the historic horrors and the current crimes. In the face of all the propaganda coming out of China to mark the 100th anniversary of the CCP, those who care about the truth must correct the record.